Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Alister Chapman here in Teddington, and today we're going to be looking at camera kit maintenance and primarily looking at how to look after your camera. This is hopefully an interactive session, so if you have any questions at any point, please do send those questions in. I'd like to thank Visual Impact for hosting this event. Visual Impact is a full facility sales and rental house. So if you have anything that you wish to purchase or anything that you need to hire, do get in touch with the guys here at Visual Impact, and I'm sure they'll help you out. And I say that during most of these, something I say during most of these sessions is build a relationship with a dealer. The guys here at VI, they know what they're talking about. They're often able to give you much better direct advice over things like waiting list times and things like that than you'll get online through Googling. So give them a ring. They're great people to work with, great people to talk to. And buy your gear from a dealer that you have a relationship with. That way, if it does go wrong, which fortunately is very rare, but when it does happen, at least you'll know where you can go and who to talk to try and get it sorted out, rather than having to scratch around on the internet. So do support your local dealer. So today, what are we going to be looking at? Well, we are going to be looking at, well, first of all, actually, let me get this bit out of the way. The advice that I'm going to give you today is based on years and years of experience. I've been looking after and maintaining my own cameras for a very, very long time. But, you know, these are fragile things, and it is, I'm not going to say easy, but it's not difficult to make a mistake when you're cleaning them if you don't take enough care. So do be very, very careful and use your own common sense. If you're not happy doing any of the things that I show here today, don't do it, is the simple solution. And get in touch with somebody that can help you out. Perhaps give the guys here a ring to maintain your cameras for you on a regular basis. Maintenance is something you do need to do regularly, especially if you want your camera to last a long time. Over the years, I've never got to the point with any of my cameras where I've had to throw anything away because it hasn't been properly maintained, but I do often see cameras that I've borrowed and everything else, and you think, my goodness, that hasn't been looked after. So it is something you should spend a bit of time to do. It's an important part, I think, of owning a camera, is to look after that camera properly. So where do we start with all of this maintenance and stuff like that? So this is what we're going to cover. General precautions to avoid damage to your camera in actual use. APR, what is it and when to do it? Connectors and connections, and there's going to be some important notes there about how to connect things up so you don't damage your camera. Cleaning the camera's exterior, cleaning the optical port on the front of the camera, then cleaning lenses and optics, and then storage and long-term considerations. So a lot to cover. So in terms of general practice, let me just remind myself what I wrote here down in my notes. So weather resistant or weather sealed doesn't mean your camera is waterproof. What that means is that should you be caught out in a brief shower of rain, hopefully the rain won't get into the camera. But if you're working in the rain for more than a few minutes, you really, really should have a rain cover on the camera, because water will find its way in. Looking at my FX9 here, you know, there are places like this connector here, water can get into this area here. So, you know, and the SDI connectors, although they've got caps on them to keep the water out, it can still get in there. So if you're working in the rain, working in the wet, use a rain cover over your camera to keep it dry. Even if that just means putting a plastic bag or a bin bag over the camera, that is much, much better for the camera than leaving it exposed to the weather. Another place wet will get in is around the lens mount here, because this area here can't be completely and fully sealed. And if water does get into your camera, then it is potentially catastrophic. And you might not actually notice an issue immediately. That water can get in. That can set up a damp environment inside the camera that over a period of days, weeks, or even months causes corrosion inside the camera. And it might be that a few weeks down the road, suddenly your camera stops working. And it's like, why is my camera not working? And it might be because you got it wet several weeks ago. So wet is not good for these cameras. Weather sealing hopefully keeps the worst of it out, but it's really only there for keeping it out for a short period of time if you're caught by surprise, or perhaps while you're trying to actually put that rain cover on the camera. And the same for dust and dirt and things like that. If you're out in a dusty environment, dust and dirt can be just as damaging to a camera as the wet. Dust will get into the cooling fans and those systems, even though the cooling system on this camera, the FX9, FX6 is the same, is separate from the electronics. That dust will get into the fan. If it's gritty or anything like that, it will set up a very gritty surface and things will wear out very quickly. So you don't want dust getting into the fans. You don't want, again, dust getting into the lens mount, into your connectors or anywhere else, because it's going to be a nuisance. So in a dusty or dirty environment, use a rain cover on your camera to keep that dust off. And at the end of the day, maintain your camera as quickly and as soon as you can. So if it got wet, dry it out as early as possible. If it got dusty, clean it off at the end of the day. Don't put it away and leave it for weeks on end, because that dust isn't going to go away by itself. And in fact, actually, I'm looking at my FX9 here and realizing it is actually quite a bit dusty from the last shoot that I used it on, which I've kind of deliberately left for today, but really I should have cleaned it off before I put it away. Something about putting cameras away that I will cover in more detail later is that if you put a wet camera into a storage box or anything like that, it's going to stay wet for a very long time because the box will prevent it from drying out. So clean it, maintain it at the end of each day, each shoot, and do that as regularly and as often as you can. So, So the next thing to look at is actually APR. So you might have heard about APR, and it will pop up when you turn the camera on in the menu. In fact, this camera, I think there's life in the battery, there is, hasn't been on for a little while. So if I do turn it on, let me just take the viewfinder off, put that out of the way, or that screen there. When I turn my camera on now, I will probably get a message on the screen, and it says here, I'm not sure if you can see that, but it actually says, please execute APR. So I will. I'm going to hit the button here to select OK. Now it says exclude, cover the lens to exclude all light. So I have a lens cap on the camera, and I select execute, and I do it. And it executes the APR. This doesn't take very long. It takes a few seconds. Certainly less than a minute. APR OK, there we are, it's done. Now what APR does is it removes any bright pixels, any white dots in your image, and I recommend that you perform APR regularly. So not only when the camera asks for it, but also, if I bring up this slide here, after you fly. Now, when you fly on a plane and you fly at high altitude, you're further up in the atmosphere and there are more cosmic rays up there, and it's cosmic rays that cause the problems with these pixels, these bright pixels. So whenever you fly anywhere with your camera, perform an APR before you continue with your filming. Also, you should do an APR whenever you're going to shoot using gain, because when you start adding a lot of gain in the camera, that's when you'll start seeing any problem pixels. So if you've got a night shoot or a shoot where you're going to be shooting in low light levels where you are using gain, that would be a really good time to do the APR. You can do it as many times as you want. There's no limit to it. And as we've seen, it only takes a few seconds. It also helps sort out your black balance, which will result in tiny bit less noise in your picture. So it's very well worth doing. To do it manually, you go into the camera's main menu system, and in the technical section, you'll find the option to do APR. Now, cameras like the A7S III, the FX3, or the DSLR style cameras that actually have a built-in mechanical shutter, they do APR automatically for you every time, not every time, but when you turn the camera off. Sometimes you'll hear, as when you turn the FX3 off, that the shutter will close, and there'll be a slight pause, a slight delay before the camera actually switches off, and that's the camera doing the APR. Because it has a shutter, it doesn't need you to put a lens cap onto the camera, so it's able to do it automatically without your interaction or intervention. With a camera that doesn't have a mechanical shutter like this, because you have to make sure that cap is on, it's going to ask you to do it. So APR is a good bit of regular maintenance to do, because that will help keep your camera going. A few people commenting on the shirt. Yes, a shirt, another one of the shirts that my wife's made for me. This is my test chart shirt, so my engineering shirt today. So I've got my engineering head on today. Just moving on, external devices and connecting external devices. The SDI connectors on these cameras are easily damaged if power flows the wrong way. So whenever you're connecting your camera to an external device, it's really important that you connect things up in the correct order. And that order is to, first of all, put your battery on the camera. Then any power cables, excuse me, any power cables from the battery to your accessories. So if you're using a DTAP battery, which I often do, in fact, this is a DTAP battery on here. First of all, battery onto the camera, then power cables from the battery to your external monitor or external accessories. Then once you've done that, if you're using a monitor, turn the monitor on and check that it powers up. And what that's doing is making sure that that power connection to the monitor is correct, that you've connected it the right way round, and that there's no issues with that power connection. Then next step is, after all your power connections have been done, then connect your SDI and HDMI connections. They should be the last thing that you connect. And by doing it in this order, what it ensures is that your DTAP cable is plugged in correctly, or your external power cables are all plugged in correctly before you plug in the SDI cables, and that ensures that the SDI cables don't become a power return to the battery. So we get this problem with blown SDIs whenever the SDI or HDMI cable becomes the way that power returns back to the battery. And that can happen as you're plugging in the power cable and the positive pin makes that connection before the negative pin. And then for that momentary instant, while you're putting the plug in, the SDI cable becomes the negative and return back to the camera and the battery, and that blows the SDI or the HDMI. So battery onto the camera, power cables first, then SDI and HDMI. And what if you're disconnecting? Well, powering down or changing the battery, power everything down, disconnect the SDI and HDMI cables, then the battery, then put the new battery on, check the monitor powers up correctly again, then reconnect your SDI and HDMI cables and power everything back on. Yes, it is a pain in the backside to keep replacing those SDI cables each time you change your battery or your power supply. But it's worth it, because if you're on a shoot and you do blow your SDI or your HDMI output, that's a lot more inconvenient than simply having to unplug a cable each time you change your battery. So I really do recommend that you do it. The instances of SDIs and HDMIs blowing are quite rare. It isn't super common, but it does happen, and it's very expensive to get the camera fixed when it does. So the newer SDIs, 12G SDIs, are more prone to this than the 6G, which is more prone to it than the 3 and the 1.5G before. So it's well worth taking that precaution when you're on a shoot of plugging things in and unplugging them in the correct order. So powering down, power everything down, disconnect the HDMI and SDI first, and then disconnect everything else. So SDIs and HDMI should be the first thing you disconnect. Last thing to be connected, first thing to be disconnected. So moving on to actual maintenance and cleaning the camera. So I've got a whole stack of stuff over here that I'm going to be showing you as we go along as to what I do. And this is based from experience. I film storms, hurricanes, tornadoes. It gets very, very dusty. I was filming on a military base at the weekend, and that was incredibly dusty. As anyone in the UK knows, right now it's very, very dry here. There's a lot of dust about. When I'm filming the storms, I'm in rain. You add rain to dust and you get mud and the camera gets dirty, things like that. If you're ever filming in a saltwater environment, so that might be on a beach, and you don't have to be getting wet, just being on a beach will cover your camera in salt, because as the waves break, small amounts of spray get picked up by the rain. You probably don't even notice it or feel it. But if you go home and if you sort of wipe your skin and lick your finger, it'll taste salty. And that salt is highly corrosive to the magnesium alloy that these cameras are made out of. So it's really worth spending a bit of time, if you've been anywhere near the sea in particular, to clean your camera, or just generally keep it clean, because it's much easier to keep a clean camera clean than it is to try and scrub it when it gets really, really dirty. So how do I start? Well, the first thing you want to do is to get rid of dust and dirt, because that can be quite gritty. And if you have got a camera that's gritty and you start doing a wet clean, then that's going to grind into your paintwork and everything else, grind potentially onto your LCD screen or scratch it, and that's not good. So I start off with a big paintbrush, a nice big soft paintbrush. This one's actually a bit overkill. You could use a slightly smaller one than this. I'll use a smaller paintbrush. Let's have a look at these paintbrushes and a toothbrush. And the first thing that I do is with my big paintbrush is just to brush all the dust off. And you can get into all the little sort of nooks and crannies on the camera. And it really doesn't take very long, just with a nice soft paintbrush, just to get in there and wipe all the dust off. And I've got a bit of dust up here. So that's the first thing that I do. I do not start with a blower or canned air. Heavy blowers and canned air will blow that dust into the camera. The rubber seals on these, if you blow on them hard enough, the dust will get past that seal. If you start blowing around your lens mount here, the dust will go behind the lens mount. It makes any problem with dust worse when you start using canned air, compressed air, and all of those things. A little soft brush like this, it's just going to flick that dust off the camera. So you're getting rid of the majority of the dust and the dirt, and this is a very soft brush, not doing any harm, and you're actually wiping it off the camera rather than pushing it into all the nooks and crannies. For places like here around the switches and things like this is where your smaller brush comes in handy, because you can just get into all those little gaps in there. This is just a little soft paintbrush and get all of that dust out and around your control wheels. And if you've got a control wheel like this, just turn it and remove the dust. And you can get all the dust with this little brush out of these little switches, around the little controls and the knobs here, and that just stops it from working into the camera at a later date. And it's quite dusty in there, so that's all gone now. A little paintbrush like this, or a pack of paintbrushes, doesn't cost a lot of money. So once you've got rid of the bulk of the dust and dirt off the camera, the next step for me is a puffer blower. Now, some words of caution about these puffers. I've had this one for a long time. This is a one-piece molded puffer. This is all one bit. There's no add-on bits. There are some cheap puffers on the market where the nozzle part here is a separate plastic nozzle. You've got the puffer bit, and then there might be a valve in the back. Avoid those. Try and get one like the proper rocket puffer, which is a very popular one, or this one that's a one-piece molding. This just says jumbo. I've had this for a long time, because the nozzle can't come off. And the reason why that's important is if you are doing your optics or a lens and you're puffing away and that nozzle shoots off, it can hit your lens, hit your sensor, and that's really not good. So a one-piece puffer. And then what I can do now is just any sort of holes or anything that I couldn't get to with my paintbrush, just gently blow off any remaining dust. So that hopefully now has got rid of the dust. So we handle these cameras all the time in this hot sunny weather. You might have sun cream on your hands, and one special warning actually about sun creams and things like that is not so much sun cream, but mosquito repellent. If you shoot somewhere and you've put mosquito repellent on yourself, and if you've got it on your hands, don't touch your camera. Mosquito repellent, most of them will melt plastic. And if you've got it on your hands and you start handling the camera, it makes a real mess of the camera. That stuff is nasty. So if you've used mosquito repellent or you've got it on your hands, wash your hands before you use anything plastic. It's really, really corrosive stuff. I know from experience. So that's something to be really well aware of. Somebody's asked actually, will this workshop be recorded? Yes, it'll be recorded, and link will go out to where you can get it. As well as the puffer, actually, another thing is you can get small battery-operated vacuum cleaners, and you could use that as an alternative to blowing the dust off. Is just they're very low-power little keyboard vacuums. They're sold for cleaning keyboards, and that's another useful way to clean that dust off. So we've got rid of the dust. Now we want to clean the camera body. Now, what we don't want to do is to get a spray and then just start spraying all over the camera, because that's putting water onto the camera, which could find its way into the camera. So the way I do it is I have some of these. This is a really nice soft cloth. You can buy these in most car accessory shops as a polishing cloth for a car, or sometimes they're called shop towels. And it's just a really nice, non-abrasive, soft cloth. Now, I don't use this for lenses and optics. This is just for cleaning the camera. Now, I have a magic solution in here that this stuff is really, really expensive and hard to get. No, seriously, kidding. All this is clean water, ideally deionized water if you can, but that's a bit overkill, with literally, for this size of container, 3 drops of washing up liquid. That's all you need, a tiny amount of washing up liquid, that ordinary dish soap that you use for washing your dishes. It doesn't need to be a really, really strong solution. You're not trying to remove grease from an engine here, at least hopefully not. You're just trying to clean the surface of your camera. It doesn't need a lot of detergent to break down the grease that's maybe come from your fingers in general touching the camera. So I just take this and squirt that onto my cloth. So my cloth is damp, don't want it to be soaking wet. And now I can just wipe down the side of my camera. Just turn it off, doesn't want to be on. And you would be surprised how much those few drops of dish soap take off. In fact, I can actually see the cloth is quite dirty just from doing that. I haven't cleaned my camera very much lately. And just repeat the process for the whole of the camera. And because you're using so little soap or cleaner, it doesn't leave a residue on the camera that might become sticky later on or anything like that. Handle is a really good place to actually focus a bit of attention on, because this is where you hold the camera. So if you've got dirty hands, that's where it will come. It doesn't make the camera sticky. It doesn't leave any nasty residues. It's very, very mild. It's not going to take your paint off. It's not going to do anything nasty. And it's readily available. Just get a little squeezy bottle like this. You can buy them online. And this will last you for ages, and it's really, really cheap. Now, what about if you do have more stubborn marks or damage? Perhaps you've been working with a camera assistant who's used some really cheap camera tape and they've stuck all their labels for your media on here, and you've got sticky residue on here. How do you get that off without wrecking the camera? So let's put that to one side for a moment. So we've got some slightly stronger options, and a really good one actually is glass cleaner. Glass cleaner doesn't tend to contain lots of strong detergents because it doesn't want to leave streaks or marks on your windows. So glass cleaner is one option. And actually, this is really good for cleaning your LCD screen. So if you want to clean the LCD screen, have a look at that. Get any nastiness off the LCD. Again, we've just put a little bit. Let's turn it on. tiny bit on the cloth, and then just wipe gently on the LCD screen, and it will come up really nice and clean and streak free. So perhaps glass cleaner, and that has come up lovely and clean actually. I don't know if you look at that, not a mark on it. And you can also use this on the body of the camera, but this won't get sticky stuff off. So glass cleaner won't generally remove sticky tape, stuff like that. So our other options are, and my favorite is this one. This is isopropyl alcohol. And you can buy this on places like Amazon. Most of your video, I'm sure video dealers will be able to supply this to you, or a chemist. And this is pure isopropyl alcohol. So this is just alcohol. And again, this won't leave a residue. It's water soluble, so you can actually dilute it a bit if you need to. And we can use it on the same cloth. We don't need to use a different cloth. It's not a nasty chemical. It's not like some of the nasty chemicals. And we can use this to remove residues from sticky tape and things like that. Now, some of the residues that you do get, even the alcohol won't remove. So then you have to get into the really strong stuff. Now the screen should be flashing red and going, danger, danger, warning, warning, because by the time we get to this point, we're starting to get into some really nasty chemicals, or having to use chemicals that you don't really want on your camera. Solvents. And one that is really, really good for removing sticky stuff is acetone. And again, you can buy this on Amazon. It's readily available. It's not difficult to get. And it's much stronger than the alcohol as a solvent. And it does melt some types of plastic. And one of the places where you will find acetone regularly is in nail polish remover. It's one of the prime ingredients for a lot of nail polish removers. Now, in a nail polish remover, it's very heavily diluted. So it's unlikely to do a lot of damage to any plastic unless it's on that plastic for an extensive period of time. So nail polish remover is first port of call for me for removing sticky stuff. If that doesn't work, then you might have to go to neat acetone, but keep acetone well clear of plastic parts, because ABS plastic, it will actually melt. So if you're going to use acetone, do a test first. So to do a test, a piece of kitchen towel. And in fact, this nail varnish remover is acetone free. The ingredient in this one is, where is it on here? Ethyl acetate, and it's a little bit less aggressive than acetone. So you put a tiny bit on a cloth, find a bit of plastic that, if you're going to touch it, let's say the mic holder here, and just touch it on one corner, just leave it for a few seconds and just have a look. Does it get sticky? Does it have any effect? If it doesn't, you're okay. But do that test first if you're using anything stronger than alcohol, to make sure that what you're using isn't going to damage your camera. You really, really don't want to be using these stronger solvents on anywhere on this stuff. This is fragile electronics. But if you've got this horrible sticky mess from sticky tape, it's only going to get worse unless you get it off. So start with a nail polish remover, because that's diluted, and work your way up. And if you do end up using acetone, acetone is water soluble, so you can use the acetone to rub off that sticky mess and then rinse it using a wet cloth to make sure you completely remove the acetone. Acetone is a last resort. I very, very rarely ever get to that point, fortunately. Nail polish remover, because it's either diluted or uses a slightly different chemical, is a much better solution first. When you're trying to remove that real sticky gunge, you're going to have to use a solvent of some sort. Another method actually you can use sometimes for getting that sticky mess off is a pencil eraser. You know, the erasers that you get for pencils, is to use a pencil eraser to gently rub, but then that will potentially rub your paint off. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but gently rubbing, almost trying to make the sticky stuff roll into a ball sometimes will get it off. So a pencil eraser you can try, then move on to your nail varnish remover. So that's looking at kind of the outside of the camera. So where do we go next? Well, cleaning the optical port. And again, let me move some of this stuff out of the way. So when we're talking about the optical port, I'm talking about where the lens goes. So let me just remove some of this stuff off my camera, remove my hand grip, first of all, so that's out of the way. So whenever you're doing stuff with the optical port, you want to make sure that you can get at it nice and comfortably, which is why I'm removing all of this stuff off my camera now. And I'll take the viewfinder off as well. So that's out of the way. Oh yeah, just a lot of people tell me they have a real problem undoing these connectors. Let me show you a little trick here. Let me plug that back in. So how do we unplug this connector? Because it can be quite a challenge sometimes. If you try and just push the things in and pull it out, it doesn't seem to want to come out. So the way to do it is grabbing holds of the sides of it, squeeze and push down as you squeeze, which releases the catches, and it then comes out actually really rather easily. If you just pull, even though I'm squeezing, the catches that are inside here don't get a chance to disengage. You're pulling against those catches and that stops them releasing. But if you push this way towards the camera and squeeze and then pull, it just comes out, easy as that. So the trick with these is to squeeze and push in and then pull out, and it comes out really easily. So that's the way to get those undone. Right, so camera stripped down, and the optical port is obviously here, this part of the camera here. This isn't the sensor, it is an optical low-pass filter, and although it's not a sensor, it is still quite fragile and quite delicate. So you definitely don't want to be putting your acetone anywhere near this. We want to treat this with an enormous amount of respect. So again, what do I start with? Well, I start off with my puffer. In theory, you should never be putting your fingers on this, so nothing greasy, nothing sticky, or anything like that should ever touch this part of the camera. So the only problem you should ever really encounter is dust. So a little puffer like this, and again, this is why you don't want a nozzle that can come off, is in most cases all you need. And it's simply a case of getting the puffer and just giving things a little blow. And in fact, I can see that there were a few little bits of dust on there, and they have now gone. And that should be it. Now, words of warning, words of caution here. Now, it's very easy when you're doing this to be leaning over it like this when you're doing it, and you're breathing out, and potentially there's going to be spit going onto the sensor when you do that. Potentially other mucky stuff ending up on that sensor if you're directly over it. So don't do that. Try and work to one side. You're less likely to get stuff on the sensor accidentally. Don't on the sensor. Don't go to your sensor and go on the sensor, because that's actually going to deposit stuff from inside your mouth onto the sensor that is going to be harder to clean off than just dust, which will blow off. If you've got something more stubborn than that on your sensor, then you are going to have to do something a bit more aggressive. Anything aggressive, sorry, I keep calling it sensor, optical filter, is not a good thing. So what's my next step? Well, my next step is this. This is a lens pen. And this one's a really nice one because the brush is protected. Now, push a little button here, and I don't know if you can see it. Let me just do it against this white cloth here. So you can see there's a brush in there that comes out. So that keeps this very clean. And this is a very special type of brush. It's non-scratching, designed for optical applications. And next thing that I would do if I've got something stubborn on here is ever so gently brush it off. And you want to brush from the outside towards the edge. Now I'm not in the ideal position to do this. You just very gently from the outside to the edge, brush anything off really gently. That's the next step, and that shouldn't damage this. This is designed for this, and you just do it really, really gently. I'm not scrubbing, I'm not rubbing. This is just a brush. And then to finish off, back with my little puffer, so that now you've dislodged whatever it was that was on there, you've blown it off, blown it out of the way with the puffer. What if that doesn't work? What's the next step? Well, this lens pen device here, so if we get rid of that end, if I turn it around and take the cap off, this has a special cleaning head here that you can use for lenses and optics. So you could use that to actually rub very gently again on that optical block, or preferably going to use something like this. This is a sensor cleaning swab. Now, although this isn't the sensor of the camera, this is a optical filter, these are very, very gentle, so these are a really good way to clean this. And you want to have a fresh one each time you do this. Don't try and reuse these. Open the packet up, and this is one designed for full frame, and again you can buy these from most video or photography shops, and if you're a dealer. And we do a dry clean with this. Don't use any solvents or liquids at this point. This is just, it's almost like a little brush, but this is a bit firmer than a brush. And again, we work from the inside to the edge. So I go up, down, left, right. And because this is pretty much the same size as that optical block, it only takes a few wipes like that to clean it. And this will actually remove fingerprints and things like that without needing to resort to chemicals in most cases. They're really good and they're not expensive. I always keep some of these in my camera kit. So whenever I'm traveling, whenever I'm going anywhere, wherever I go, I have some of these. At the very minimum, I'll have my lens pen tool, because if I don't have one of these available, I can at least use that to do the same thing. But I'd much prefer to use these, because each time I use this, it's a fresh one, it's a clean one. And an important thing about that, of course, is this having just come out of the packet, it's not gritty, it's not got any dirt on it, so it's not going to make the situation worse. So we've gone that far. What if even this isn't getting that stubborn fingerprint or mark off? Well, this is where we start having to think about chemicals again. And I will say again, chemicals, we don't want to put chemicals near our cameras if we can avoid it. But isopropyl alcohol is pretty tame as chemicals go. So this is what I use, and I will just pour a tiny drop of this, or just pour some onto my swab. I don't put the alcohol on the sensor, I put the alcohol on the swab, and then do the same thing. And I don't want to do this more than I need to, so I'm just going to go from the center out once, twice, and that will dry in a few seconds. Actually, I had too much alcohol on here, and it has actually left a few drops, which I shall just scoop off. And in a few seconds, that will dry, and I should now have a fingerprint-free optical filter. Don't scrub. Never get in there and rub, because that will take the coatings off that filter. It is delicate, that filter. It should be treated with the utmost respect. And using alcohol to clean it is a last resort. Generally speaking, a fingerprint, a smudge on that optical filter won't show up in your footage, and it won't degrade your footage. A speck of dust will. So a speck of dust, if you're using a very, very small aperture, f11, f12, f16 might look like a little donut in your picture. But a fingerprint or a smudge on the front of a filter or a lens even almost never ever actually shows up in the image. And I think some people really get obsessed by it. Oh God, there's a mark on my lens, and they start scrubbing away at it, and they do more damage than the mark will ever do itself. So don't start cleaning your lens or your sensor, your optical filter here unnecessarily. It's something really you shouldn't need to ever do. If it's never been touched, you should always just be able to blow off any dust or dirt. If it's been touched, that's left grease on it, that attracts more dirt, then you might need to resort to a dry clean with one of these. And 99% of the time, that dry clean will do the job. But if it has somehow got really, really dirty, then pure, 100% pure, or 99% I think is as good as you can generally get, 99.9% pure isopropyl alcohol with one of these should do it. If that hasn't done it, then you're going to have to take expert advice as to how to get it clean. Do not put acetone or nail varnish remover on that, because it will take the coatings off the filter. So, this is as aggressive and as severe as you should ever go. And actually, deionized water with one drop of washing up liquid in it, just one drop, that's all it needs, is a really good degreaser. So deionized water could also be used, but just one drop. The problem with deionized water is it takes longer to dry out. So isopropyl alcohol is my preferred one for that. Now, just looking at that. Yep, it's all good, all nice and clean in there. So lenses and other optics. So let me just put my lens. Actually, we'll just work with just the lens. I think I have a slide for that. Right. Treat lenses the same as you would the camera body, basically. So the outside of my lens, I don't know where my back cap's gone. Outside of the lens, same process. Brush off any dirt first. Again, I don't want to use canned air because that will just blow dirt in. So that's the outside of the body. For getting in, let me just put this camera away down here for a minute. For getting into things like the ribbed area on the lens here, or pitch gears, toothbrush. Really good for getting in those lines. And again, basically, most of the time, it's just a case of removing dust, so you don't need to use a liquid. And a toothbrush will really get in there. This is actually one of those free toothbrushes. If you ever fly, in any sort of premium cabins on a plane, premium economy, business class, they give these away. You can buy them. Toothbrushes are a couple of pounds in a supermarket. They're hardly expensive things. So that just will get all the dirt out from inside those grooves. Or again, perhaps a paintbrush. Toothbrush I find works really well for this. And the same thing here, if you've got a really dirty camera, this is my washing up liquid, my water with 1 or 2 drops of washing up liquid on a cloth, and we can just wipe any dirt off the outside of the lens, and that will get rid of your greasy bits. That tiny bit of washing up liquid is remarkably effective for removing greasy marks. Again, like the optical block or the optical filter we just cleaned, we can use the puffer to blow out inside the lens, or here. Oh, that was really quite dusty. Blows off the dust, and in fact I can see that is now nice and clean. But if we want to clean it more, if we need to clean it more, so something I carry in my kit is this. This is actually a spectacle cleaner, or it was originally, but also isopropyl alcohol, again, works really well. And I can just quick squirt, mist the lens, and wipe that off with a lens cloth. So lens cloth, not my other cloth, it's actually a lens cloth. Whoa, warning, warning, stop, stop, stop. Brakes on. I just picked this lens cloth off up the table. This has been kicking around in the bottom of my kit bag. This will never go near that glass. because this has been floating around in the bottom of my camera kit. It's probably full of dust, grit, dirt, and everything else. Never, ever use a lens cloth that you've just had sticking in the bottom of your camera bag or even in a pocket in your camera bag, because it will get dirty. And if there's one teeny tiny bit of sharp grit in here, and it just takes the one, and you go like that, lens ruined. That spoiled that lens, because that little tiny bit of grit is all it takes to clear the lens off. So this is why it's really important when we're doing our lenses to start off with a blower, perhaps, to get rid of that dust, dirt, and grit, so it's not on the lens. Perhaps you might use a soft paintbrush then to get into these corners, so that you get the edge around here, around the edge of the lens. You often get dirt and dust in there, and a really soft paintbrush. You can get a sable paintbrush. With sable, they're really soft, but any really good quality soft paintbrush, you can just get into that little edge there, that difficult to get bit that a cloth won't get into, and you can remove the dirt. In fact, I can see a few bits of dust that have come out from there, and then we can blow it away. So we're getting rid of the grit and anything that might scratch the lens before we start cleaning any more aggressively. And then my lens cloths, they live in a sealed bag. Now, most good quality lens cloths as well can be washed. So if they do get dirty, you can wash them, but they stay in a sealed bag to keep the dirt out. And then take my lens cloth out and give it a good shake. Make sure there's nothing nasty in there. And now I can gently wipe my lens. So the way I do this is I kind of create a little knob here, like that. And then I use that to wipe the lens. So I'm not really putting any pressure on the glass. I'm just using it to wipe whatever might be on this lens off. And that will leave you with a nice clean lens in most cases. If I do have fingerprints on here, isopropyl alcohol, and then just do the same thing with my lens cloth. So I'm not putting any pressure on. The only pressure that's going on here really is coming from the cloth, not from me forcing anything onto it. And that's left me with a really nice, clean lens. So we don't ever want to, I see a lot of people do this, they get their finger in here and they start doing that. And I don't know, if you've got to the point where the alcohol won't clean your lens off, you might need to do that. But if you've got any grit trapped or anything like that, you are going to scratch the lens very easily. So don't put your finger in there, just use the cloth itself. So there's no tension really, just to clean the front of that lens off. And do that, your lens should last a very, very long time. And again, big no-no with acetone or nail polish remover, anything like that on here, because that will strip the coatings off a lot of lenses. So we want to, our most severe chemical that I will use is isopropyl alcohol. And this stuff is, you can buy it in large quantities quite cheaply, so it will last a very long time. Rear elements that are deeply recessed in here, this might be where you want to use a vacuum cleaner. And I don't have one here, but what you can do there is you have if you have a vacuum cleaner with a hose, just tape it, clamp it somewhere, hold the lens above it. Don't actually suck into there, because you could suck all the wiring out and do all sorts of damage. So just have your vacuum cleaner just underneath the lens, and then just use your paintbrush just to get in there and flick out any dirt or dust. Or if you don't have a vacuum cleaner, just do it like this, holding the lens this way up, so that any dust or dirt that's in there will fall out of the lens. So it's not going to fall into the lens, it will fall out of the lens. These paintbrushes are really useful, and that again is all you should ever really need to do, because a big part of the maintenance of this kit is just not putting your fingers in there and not getting these greasy. If they don't get greasy, then it's just going to be dust, and that is easily removed with soft paintbrush and a puffer. So lenses, put the lens cap back on. Right. Storage and storage considerations for your camera. So this is, I think, really important, and it's really important that you never store a wet camera, especially if you use a Pelican case or Pelican style case. There's nothing wrong with Pelican cases. This is not a diss against Pelican cases. I use them and they are absolutely fantastic things to use. But a Pelican case is waterproof. And if your camera has been wet for any reason, let me just put my lens back on here, just keep my sensor clean. Now I've got it clean, I don't want to get dirty again. You've got your camera, it's a bit wet, and you put it in that Pelican case, you close the Pelican case, it's not going to dry out. And that can lead to corrosion issues internally inside the camera that can maybe manifest themselves many months or even a year or so later. So never ever pack a wet camera away. Just always make sure it's thoroughly dried out. And it may mean that you need to use a hairdryer or something like that, just to gently dry the camera off and make sure it's properly dry. And if you do use Pelican cases to store your cameras, put some sachets of silica gel in those Pelican cases so that if there is any moisture in there, they will absorb the moisture. Silica gel doesn't last forever. I see people using the same sachets of silica gel for years and years and years. Once it's absorbed its full load of water, it won't absorb any more. But you can rejuvenate silica gel by baking it in the oven. So you put set the oven to, I think it's 100 degrees C. I would check this. So if the silica gel is in a paper or a cloth pouch, you can put it in the oven at 100 degrees C for about an hour and bake it, and that will dry it back out again, and that rejuvenates the silica gel and it can be reused. But silica gel isn't particularly expensive. Often you'll find little pouches supplied when you buy equipment in the packaging, so it's worth saving those. Put them in your Pelican cases and it will help keep the camera dry if there's any excess moisture in there. So that is really beneficial for long-term storage. What else have I got in my notes here about that? Clean it before you put it away. Now, lithium batteries, that was the other one that I really wanted to go on. So lithium batteries are camera batteries. They're almost all lithium. If you pack your lithium batteries away fully charged, that's fine if you're going to use them next week or maybe in a couple of weeks' time. But if you're ever packing equipment away long-term, during the pandemic, a lot of my equipment didn't get used for many months. It doesn't do the batteries any good to leave them in that fully 100% charged state for more than about a week. So you actually want to discharge the batteries to around about 50 to 70% before storing them for more than a week. Some batteries, like the DJI drone batteries, they will actually discharge themselves automatically if you don't use them, to extend and prolong the life of those batteries. So don't store lithium batteries fully charged, discharge them a bit first. And similarly, don't store them completely discharged, because if you completely discharge them and store them and they go even lower in voltage, because there are electronics in these batteries that monitor the battery all the time, and that takes a tiny amount of power, and eventually that voltage will go down too low for the battery to be able to be recharged again. And then you have a battery that you're not going to be able to use. So storing batteries, they want to be between 50 and 70% charge. And you should check your batteries every month or so to make sure that they haven't discharged too far and that they're not too charged up if you want to have a good long life out of your lithium batteries. So that's lithium batteries. And actually that really is everything that I was aiming to cover in today's session. So keep your cameras nice and clean and tidy. They'll last longer, stops them getting sticky and grubby, things like that. It's something that I do regularly. My cameras have lasted me many years as a result. This is now 3 years old. I think my F5 and F55 was 8 or 9 years old before I sold it. That was a camera lasted me a very long time, and it was still in lovely condition when I sold it. So it is worth doing. It is worth looking after your equipment properly, spending a bit of time once a week, once a month, whatever is appropriate for the amount of usage you give your equipment, to keep it in good order. So just checking on questions. So questions, if I'm on a beach and it's very hot, is the risk of overheating worse than the risk of a bit of salt? Well, a loose-fitting rain cover over a camera shouldn't prevent air from circulating around the camera, and actually it will take the camera body itself out of the direct sunlight. So with a loose-fitting cover, the camera shouldn't really get significantly hotter. Don't forget there are fans in these cameras circulating the air. They will shut down to prevent damage. That salt water, if it gets into the fan vent in here, it's going to get onto the fan, it's going to get into the metalwork that's in here, you won't be able to clean it out, and salt water and salt with this magnesium alloy that these cameras are made of sets up a really nasty corrosion that once it gets into the magnesium is very difficult to stop, and you get this white furry powder. Now, it's something I don't know why I missed it, but I did. You can get solutions such as this. This is called 500 PSI Salt Away. You'll get this in dive shops, boating shops, and things like that. And this is a simple pump action spray, and this will stop that corrosion. So this neutralizes the salt, and it actually creates a film over the aluminium and the magnesium that the cameras are made of to prevent corrosion. So if you are working on beaches a lot, I used to film the windsurfing world tour, and our cameras really had a hard time. This is well worth having, and at the end of the day, same process. It's basically spray it onto your cloth and wipe the camera down. If the camera is obviously salty, you'll see white deposits on the outside of the camera, then you may actually want to directly spray this onto the camera in that situation and then wipe it off. But using a good quality salt neutralizer can really prolong the life of the camera if you film on boats, in the sea, if you're filming on beaches, and you'd be really surprised actually how salty they get just from the spray that comes off the waves. Generally when you're on a beach, the wind blows onshore. It's just the way the mechanics of things work in the environment. So the spray from the waves gets blown onshore. You end up with a thin film of salt on the camera. And if there's any damage to the paintwork on the camera where the metal is exposed, that will start to corrode very quickly. So your first thing to do at the end of each day is just wipe the camera down, just remove any salt, and just your water with washing up liquid and cloth will do that. But if it really is getting salty, then this stuff is really, really good for prolonging the life of the camera. There are other similar brands. This is the one I use. I've had this little bottle of it I've had for many years. You don't need a lot. It will last a very long time. And it's well worth having. The same with the lenses as well. All the aluminium is very readily corroded by salt. So it's something that you really want to try and avoid. So rain cover is your first line of defense. Second line of defense is just cleaning it, your regular cleaning and regular maintenance. Third and fourth line of defense when it gets really bad is to use a salt neutralizing solution like that. So a couple of people have commented about when they're cleaning their sensors is they do it with the camera facing down and work that way up. Absolutely, that is a really good way to do it, because then any dust that is in there when you're brushing or blowing is going to fall out rather than going any further into the camera. For the sake of this presentation, it wasn't really practical for me to do that, so you could see what I was doing. But yes, absolutely, put the camera on the tripod perhaps and clean it facing downwards. Same with your lenses. What about using fluids that come when you buy lens swabs? Absolutely. If it's designed for cleaning lenses, then those fluids should be fine on the optical filter here as well as your lenses. This is an optical filter, no different really to the filters that you might put in front of the lenses. Just the main thing is to be very gentle. Just don't scrub, don't rub. When you're using a solution, ideally the solution should be doing the work. So the solution is just there to dissolve the grease, and then it should just wipe off without any effort. What you don't want to be doing is to be really scrubbing away at your lens, because that will scratch it. And if that coating is in any way weak, rubbing hard will take it off. So just be gentle with your equipment. cleaning the media ports on the camera as well as cleaning the cards themselves. Actually, that's a really good point. So the media ports, where you put your media on the back of the camera, you need to be gentle with these. Don't get a big, powerful vacuum cleaner and start trying to suck, because there are small springs and things in there which can be dislodged if you're too aggressive. So again, I'd come back to my little paintbrush. And my first thing really is just to sort of generally keep this area clean. Just brush it out with a paintbrush. I wouldn't use canned air. You could use a puffer, but the risk with a puffer is if you start blowing, you blow stuff further into the camera. So this is where one of those little vacuum cleaners that you can get for a keyboard would be very useful. They have really long bristles on them, and you can just sort of gently clean in that area. Don't, again, be too aggressive. And as for the media itself, I don't have any cards handy. So with the XQD and S/S cards, they have a slot in the back of the card where the connections are, and you can use your paintbrush just to get in there and very gently brush anything that might be in there out, or a puffer to blow into that slot. Don't use solvents. They shouldn't, again, because you can't actually get your fingers into that slot. There's no reason why there should be any grease or anything like that in there. With SD cards, I got one in the camera. No. Where they have the exposed contacts. If you've been fingering those and they get very, very dirty, you could use a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, either that one or this one, on a cloth, just to gently wipe the contacts off if you get any fingerprints are nasty enough on those contacts in there. Generally, media is actually pretty robust. I did some things many years ago with S/S cards, dropping them in water, putting them in the dishwasher and things like that, and they survived. Generally, media is actually pretty tough, but you don't want to go over the top with your cleaning regime. Just generally wiping the stuff off with a little bit of alcohol is all that you ever need to go. And that's as far. And again, don't put the solution on the card, put the solution on your cloth and wipe the card with the cloth. That stops everything from getting too wet. So that's answered all the questions that I've got. So in terms of what you should purchase and buy, let's lay the things out that I think everyone should have, and then we'll wrap the session up. So, start with the beginning. Soft brush for cleaning the outside of the camera, to brush that dust off, to get rid of it so it doesn't go into the camera. Paintbrush, different sizes perhaps, to get into the smaller gaps and grooves. And then toothbrush, to get into ribs and things like that. Then we have our soft cleaning cloth. This is just a soft cloth bought in an automotive store for polishing the outside of the car and things like that. You can buy packs of them very cheaply. It's really nice and soft, so it's not going to scratch the paintwork on my car. Then we have the blower as well for blowing out dust and stuff like that. Then I have my lens cloths. Again, any photo shop will be able to buy you some nice lens cloths, and these are always stored. I use these Ziploc bags. You can buy them in a supermarket. They're normally for food. And my wife is always going, why do you keep buying so many of these? I find these bags immensely useful for not just storing my lens cloths, but also storing all these little knickknacks and other things, stuff like this, loose nuts and bolts and screws and things like that. These bags are really useful. They've got like a little zippy thing on the top. My main cleaning solution is this that I use for most things, and that is simply water, preferably deionized water. That's distilled water, so it has no impurities in it, with just a few drops of washing up. And it is a few, it's not a squirt, it's literally 2 or 3 drops of washing up liquid. That is all you need, tiny, tiny amounts. And in fact, this is what you use to clean telescope mirrors and things like that. And if you've ever used this solution of just deionized water, distilled water, and 1 or 2 drops of washing up liquid, it's absolutely amazing how it removes grease. You don't need gallons of washing up liquid or some other stronger cleaner. Then there is the isopropyl alcohol, and I have the big tub that I have in the office, and I keep that little spray container. Originally, I think this had a lens cleaner in it, but I've just replaced that with isopropyl alcohol. For cleaning, just general cleaning. Then we have the sensor swabs here that I use. You can use Super 35 or full frame ones, depending on the size of sensor. Get the appropriate size for the right sensor or the optical port that you're cleaning. The lens pen here, this is a really useful tool. I can't see a brand name on this one. But again, Photoshops will be able to provide you this. You have this really soft brush on the top. Never touch this brush. As soon as you touch this brush, if I touch this brush with my fingers, that's going in the bin, because that's going to transfer the oils and greases from my fingers to this brush. You want this brush to be lovely, lovely and clean. And then at the other end, this has this like a dabber cleaning thing, and you can use that for the optical port, but I much prefer to use swabs. But you can also use that for cleaning marks off your lens. Very, very useful. A good Photoshop should be able to provide you one of those. And this is actually a really good candidate for storing in your little zippy bag, because that then makes sure that that stays clean and doesn't get any nastiness, dirt, dust, grease. Can you see that there? And really, oh yes, nail varnish remover. But this is kind of getting onto the last resort type stuff. This is perhaps just steal your wives or girlfriends. I wouldn't buy this especially because you only want to use this as a last resort. So steal your partner's, I say wives, girlfriends, oh dear, partner, whoever that might be, of whatever ethnic or sexual orientation, because maybe I'm going to wear nail varnish one day. But steal somebody else's rather than having this, because it's all too tempting to use this too often. This is a last resort cleaner. And the other one that I use, which is really good for cleaning my LCD screens, monitors as well, is a window cleaner. Simple window cleaning buying in your supermarket. Use it sparingly, don't use gallons of it. And generally, again, spray it onto the cloth and then wipe your screen gently. So those are the things that I use. I carry most of these with me. I don't take that one with me. But all the ones that remain here, so lens cloths, puffer, a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, and a couple of paint brushes and a soft cloth I travel with when I'm going anywhere in case I get into a really dusty environment, really dirty environment. I need to clean the camera on location. So I do hope you've found the session useful. The session will be recorded. There will be an email that will go out with the link to watch it again. Next week, we have a session on virtual production. So that's a very different session. There's more of a webinar presentation type session, because we don't actually have a virtual production studio here. And that's going to be, what is virtual production? How is it different to green screen and shooting plates and things like that? So do please come back and join us next week. And in the following weeks, we have further sessions on picture profiles and paint settings and things like that in your camera, how to make your camera look different. And the other one, my mind is gone blank, and I'm looking at Rob at the back of the room, and he's going, oh, I can't remember either. There is another one as well. So we're doing this one, virtual production, camera profiles, and another one that will be absolutely fascinating and immensely interesting. So do please check the list on the Visual Impact website of what they all are. So that's it for me. Enjoy this lovely weather. At least it's a bit cooler today. And I'll see you all next week, hopefully. Bye-bye for now.